Sabres sweep the Senators on the season series. A lot of takeaways to get into, one of which is whether James Reimer should be back next year with the Buffalo Sabres. Some point streaks going on right now. And we'll answer the question that everyone seems to think is a truth of the Sabres. Do they play better when the games are meaningless? I have a couple of records on that when we come back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast.
Your Locked On Sabres, your daily podcast on the Buffalo Sabres. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody, and welcome into this Wednesday edition of the Locked On Sabres podcast. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you listen to your podcast. You can check us out on our YouTube channel where you can watch the show. Be sure to like and subscribe us there. And if you'd like to hit us up on our Locked On Sabres text club and you're not already a subscriber, you can sign up by heading over to joinsubtext.com/Locked On Sabres. Sneaky Joe DiBiase here on today's show, following a season sweep of the Ottawa Senators. The Sabres get another win over Ottawa, this time in Ottawa by a final score of 5-2. A lot to get to from this game. Of course, what happened in the game, and if there's any big takeaways we can have from this game, including what I will want to get to today right away, which is, do the Sabres play better when the games are meaningless? I think that is a common feeling amongst fans, that the second that they're out of the playoff race, then the pressure is off and they feel more loose and they play more free and they get better results. Well, that is somewhat true, but it's probably not as true as you believe it is. I've got their record in the final couple of months of each season going back 5 years, at least when this core was put together originally. So that's coming up today. James Reimer, Brian Koziel, my buddy from over at WGR, was asking on Twitter yesterday whether Reimer should be somebody they seriously think about bringing back next season. I've got some thoughts on that, as he'll be going into his age 37-year-old season. And then, of course, we'll get to what's coming up this week, the rest of the week for the Buffalo Sabres. But let's start right away with where you can follow us on Twitter, because we have our all-time favorite Sabre bracket that's going on right now. There's a couple of votes that are live right now. If you want to vote on that, at Locked On Sabres is the place that you can follow us on Twitter. Also, be sure to check me out on Blue Sky. I'm there at Sneaky Joe. A lot of good stuff happening over there as well. So to get to, though, last night's game and what we saw, the 5-2 win by the Sabres over Ottawa. And the game was very opportunistic by the Sabres. It was very much a representation of a lot of the numbers that we broke down on this show yesterday, kind of the story of the two teams' seasons. The Sabres have not been a team that has generated a ton of chances. I've been a bad power play team too, of course, but their scoring chances and how often they have possession of the puck, they're not an elite team in that, Mark. They're fine, but they score goals with the best of them at 5-on-5. And this is where I gotta show my hand here, like where I was way off on this Sabre team going into the year. Now, listen, I was very skeptical that this team could be a playoff team, and that has obviously rung true, but not for the reason that I thought it would be for. If you go back in time to the summer, what I was kind of, nailing about this team is I did not believe they had the offensive firepower, the ability to finish chances, to be one of the top scoring teams in the league like they were 2 years ago. A lot of that was losing Jeff Skinner and Victor Olofsson, and to a lesser extent, Casey Middlestat when it comes to the finishing, and replacing those guys with bottom six level talents. But that has not been their problem at all. In fact, you can just look at how the Sabres are a top 5 team in the league this year at 5-on-5 goal scoring, and see that they actually don't get as many. They're not top 5 in how many chances they generate. So what does that equate to? What that says is this team buries their chances. This is one of the better finishing teams in the NHL this year. That's one of the things they're actually best at. So I not only have I got that wrong, they've actually been amazing at the thing I thought they couldn't do at all. They last night, as I mentioned, this was a representation of that. The Sabres in every mark, they got beat. They were outshot in this game, 35-22. If I can narrow the numbers down to 5-on-5 now, they were outshot 26-19. Shot attempts were 72-31 in favor of Ottawa. The scoring chances were 32-16 in favor of Ottawa. High danger chances 12-6 in favor of Ottawa. But what did the scoreboard say? Scoreboard said Sabres scored 3 goals at 5-on-5 and then 2 goals on special teams, of course. Well, one was an empty netter. So 4 goals without the empty netter. They buried their chances and Ottawa didn't. And that's a skilled Ottawa team over there. But they're 30th on 5-on-5 goals. Maybe they're not as good finishing as you might think. And I'm actually starting to wonder about them for the playoffs. Because, listen, playoffs, penalties dry up. You got to be an elite 5-on-5 team. And if Ottawa can't score at 5-on-5, well, then they better hope they're going to win all these games 2-1 when they go to the postseason, because that to me is the warning sign about them going into the playoffs. But for this team, I mean, it's kind of amazing that they have been able to finish like this. And you saw some of those plays last night that showed it off. It was at 4-on-4, so even strength, but that didn't show up in the 5-on-5 numbers. But the whole play sequence leading up to Tage Thompson's 39th goal of the year in the second period, that's when the Sabres took a commanding 3-0 lead, although it only lasted for a minute. And they're being patient. They're dropping the puck back. Tuck actually enters the zone at one point. He doesn't like what he sees. And this is kind of a 3-on-3 thing to do that he does at 4-on-4, which is, you know what? I'm just going to pull back. I'm going to keep possession. I'm not going to chip it in and turn it over. I'm not going to take a wild wrist shot from distance with no traffic in front, which is basically a turnover. I'm going to loop back. I'm going to throw it back to Dahlin, and we're going to reset. And then what happens on that reset? Dahlin drops it to Thompson. Him and Peterka play catch with the puck. Actually, I think Peterka was the one who carried it in. He gives it to Thompson. Thompson goes toe drag to the middle. And then did everybody, I know Chad DiDomenicis tweeted the same thing out, so I know he had this feeling. Did everybody else have the same reaction that I did? When Tage Thompson, right before his goal, toe drags, cuts to the middle, and his head is down. He's not looking up. The seas have parted. He has got one-on-one with Linus Ullmark, and he doesn't look at it, in part because if you watch the replay, before Tage has looked up to see that he has a wide-open shot right in front of the goaltender, almost a mini breakaway, J.J. Peterka is tapping his stick. He wants it, and he gets it, and good on Peterka to not just fire it right at the net. He's got a defenseman right there. He instead has his head up, has his eyes open. He sees Thompson all alone in the middle, the same space that he just had that we were yelling at him to shoot at. And Thompson smartly, by the way, this is where a guy that has a shot as hard as him is not all it takes to be a great goal scorer in the NHL, and why Thompson deserves credit for becoming the player he has and the goal scorer he has. If he just threw the puck over to Peterka and just kind of moseyed forward and just kind of watched, Peterka might throw the puck back to him, and he might not have the ability to shoot the puck because he's skating forward. He'd almost have to go reach back for it maybe, or he'd have to use more of his hands and his arms to rip the shot, which could make it inaccurate. Thompson, watch what he does. Thompson, this is where you got to recognize the play before you have the puck. A lot of skill in the NHL is playing without the puck. And Thompson is able to read that the pass is going to come back to him, and he has opened up his stance. He swings his hips around, opens up his stance to receive the pass so that he's able to put it right down the middle. He probably scores anyway because Ullmark is so out of position. But that's a little moment there of playing without the puck that shows how much better a player Thompson is. And he thinks the game quicker than he absolutely did at the beginning of his career. So 39 for Thompson, one more to get to 40. He is definitely going to do that. A couple of other things to look at from this game statistically, by the way. There's another goal for Alex Tuck, his 32nd of the year. Dahlin, big shot from the point. His shot improving. I put this in our text club last night. Dahlin's shot improving is what gives me more and more hope that Owen Powers is going to continue to improve. Dahlin had no shot whatsoever when he entered the NHL. First 2 years in the league, he had nothing. He would fan on pucks as often as he would get a hold of them. And, I mean, that's not 100 miles an hour. It was 86.8. But 86.8 mile an hour slap shot right where you want it to be, kind of just under that top bar. His shot has improved a lot. Powers, I think, will too. On that play, Jack Quinn, who I was a little critical of on our last show, that, yeah, he's putting up points, but he's not really, generating a lot of chances. I think the overall play isn't really happening that much yet. On that play, he just outworked Thomas Chabot. Just completely outworked him, won the board battle behind the net with a defenseman that is bigger than him and more physical than he is. He won that battle, created space, and got it to Dahlin for that one-timer. And then finally, third period, Sabres are up 3-1. The game's not over. You're halfway through the third. Ottawa's pressing. They have the puck all the time. They're generating chances. And I have no ill will towards Dylan Cousins at all. I don't care at all that he said that he was having fun in Ottawa or that it's nice to be in a playoff race. I didn't take that as a shot at Buffalo at all. I've been fine with Cousins. No problem at all. The Ottawa fans, sure, have been a little bit annoying because Senators fans and even our buddies over at Locked On Sens, who do an amazing job. They're one of the best shows on our entire network, and they like to fire things up. They're talking about Cousins like they haven't watched him play. And it's not just them. It's all Senators fans. They're excited. They're excited about the new guy. And a couple of weeks in, he's putting up a ton of points and he probably looks really good. But maybe they hadn't seen yet the things that had been driving us crazy for 2 years with Dylan Cousins. And for me, it's always been the mental part of his game, the processing of the game itself, a little stuff like we just talked about with Thompson. And that's exactly what you saw here. He's got tunnel vision. He wants to go somewhere with the pass, and he's like a quarterback that wants to fit a ball in, and he doesn't see the linebacker that's in between him and his receiver. And when he throws it, it's like, oh my, what a terrible interception. That's exactly what Cousins did last night. Has no idea that Peyton Krebs is where he is. And when you're a center in the National Hockey League, a top 6 center, you've got to be able to see that. And that is part of the reason why Cousins worked his way out of Buffalo with his play. Plays like that, where I just didn't see him. I didn't compute it, that Krebs was there and he was skating with speed and he turns it over. Krebs rips in and fires it past Linus Ullmark with a nice wrist shot. And by the way, Krebs, who I looked up, had never had a point streak of 3 games or more in his NHL career. He had never had a point streak longer than 2 games, is now riding a 5-game point streak with the Sabres down the stretch here. 9th goal of the year. Sabres take a 4-1 lead at that point, and it felt like the game was over again until 30 seconds later, and Ottawa responded again. But Krebs, 3 goals, 3 assists in his last 5 games. It has been the best offensive stretch of his career. Not a very high bar to clear, but he's certainly cleared it. And then you had Ryan McLeod scoring his 19th. So 1 goal away for McLeod to reach the 20-goal mark. We'll get to James Reimer when we come back, but I want to get some numbers in quickly here before we take a break. Are the Sabres a better team when the games don't mean anything? I think that is a common sentiment amongst fans, that is true. That when you get to March and April and they're 10 points out, 15 points out, then the pressure's off and they start playing loose and free and they start playing great. The numbers don't really back that up. I was curious to see, is that just something we feel like is true, or is that something that is actually true? So I looked back on the whole time this core has been together, which starts with the 2021 season. That's Ralph Kruger's final year. Remember, Reinhardt's even on that team, so it's not the full transition yet. But Granato comes in midway through, and Eichel's out for the season at that point, so he's not involved. And Taylor Hall is out already with a trade. So it's a lot of guys that are on the team right now, like Dahlin and Thompson and, those guys. playing more meaningful roles. Thompson actually might have been hurt at the end of that year, but the others and Cousins would have been on that team. That year on, looking at the Sabres record in the final 2 months of the year. So for every other year, this is March and April. For that first year in here, because of the COVID shortening, it was April and May. 8-11-2 in 2021. Not great. 21-22, March and April. This is the one year where they were a lot better and they were out of the race. This is the season where, you get RJ's final night at the end of the year. They had some good games at the end, and we were feeling good about them going into the next year. They went 16-9-3 in March and April of that year. That's a record that is definitely better than the rest of your season. Well, then I'm going to skip the year that they were playing meaningful games because remember, 22-23, they're playing down the stretch, try to make the playoffs. Skip that year because that's not meaningless games for this exercise. 23-24, last year, 11-9-1. Not that far off what their regular record was, 11-9-1 in March and April. And this year, in March and April, they're 8-8-1. So slightly better than what you've had recent in the whole season, but not by leaps and bounds. The totality of those 4 seasons in their final 2 months of each year, that's a .494 win percentage. Now, again, I don't want to say it's totally unfounded because their overall win percentage in those 4 seasons in the last 5 years is 40. It's a 42 win percentage. So they are winning, roughly, this is a rough estimate doing it this way, is they're winning like 7% more of their games in March and April when they're totally dead. And again, that's better, but it's not so much better that I think the point is made more than it should be, is all I mean to say. And it might be one of those things that you think is true, and maybe it's not as true as you think, that the Sabres just become the best team in the league the second that the pressure's off and they're out of the playoff race. When we come back, should James Reimer be back with the Sabres next year at age 37? We'll tackle it when we come back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast after he had another great game last night. Today's episode of Locked On Sabres is presented by Wonderful Pistachios. That is my go-to golf snack. I've got a bag I got a bag of Wonderful Pistachios in my golf bag at all times. If you're looking for a snack that packs a delicious and nutritious punch, crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein that gives you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they are packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help you keep filling fuller longer. So Wonderful Pistachios. I like the no shells variety. To me, that's just easier. You get the perfect grab and go snack for your busy days. But if you like the crack, if you like to get the in-shell option, those are available to you as well. So get snacking, get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Today's episode of the Locked On Sabres podcast also brought to you by the JP Morgan Corporate Challenge. Buffalo businesses, it is time to register for the JP Morgan Corporate Challenge. This year's event is Thursday, June 12th, features a 3.5-mile course through Delaware Park, followed by celebration with a DJ, lawn games, and a talented experience for you and your teammates. Walkers, joggers, runners, they're all welcome, whether you run for the love of it, for your company, or for the networking of the event, lasting bonds. This is your moment. Teams of 4 participants or more can register today. Registration will close on Tuesday, May 13th. So 1 part run, 1 part party. The Corporate Challenge has earned its reputation as Buffalo's corporate social event of the year. Be sure to join us for great competition, teamwork, company pride, and a true sense of accomplishment. Go to jpmorganchasecc.com, choose Buffalo as your location, and start your registration today. Again, you have till Tuesday, May 13th, but don't wait. Do it now. See you on the course at the JP Morgan Chase. Back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast, 5-2 Sabres over the Senators. Lost in all the amazing goal from Peterka to Thompson and Krebs on his point streak and some really cool, storylines out of this game, sweeping the Senators on the season. Sabres are their kryptonite, I guess. I mean, they don't have to see them when they get to the playoffs, so I guess that's good. One other thing that came out of this game was another strong game from James Reimer. He continues to be the best Sabre goaltender on the year, and it's not even close. And that even goes for Devin Levi. When Devin Levi was here in Buffalo earlier in the year, it did not go well at all. I had mentioned how last year it was a little faulty. His advanced stats looked really good. Levi's did, but his overall numbers didn't. Well, this year that wasn't true. Both looked bad. And Luukkonen's haven't looked good, and he's looked sloppy a lot all year. Reimer's just been good. Reimer's been solid. Reimer looks like a goalie that he expects to make every save right now. It doesn't matter how hard the scoring chance is. And he's making a lot of high danger chances. And you would think at an age like that, it'd be more about just being technically sound and stopping the pucks that you should and maybe not having the athleticism anymore to make any crazy saves, but he's still out here doing it. So Reimer, Brian Koziel asked a good question yesterday, Sabres pre- and post-game host on WGR. Should the Sabres think about bringing back James Reimer next season? And what the first time I saw that question, because I haven't really thought much about it. I think maybe we mentioned it in passing, but it hasn't been something that's been on my mind game in and game out as Reimer has been going through this stretch. It just reminds me a little bit too much of Craig Anderson. Craig Anderson, who was fine when he was with the Sabres. He was fine. He played his way in to a second contract. Craig Anderson was pretty good and had definitely lived up to expectation when he was a Buffalo Sabre. But look where that got them. Because even though Anderson had been the best of their goaltenders the year they missed the playoffs by 1 point, Anderson was their best goalie. But remember that season, remember the spot the Sabres were in, where their best goalie couldn't play all the time. It was like once a week because of his age and how much workload he could really take. He had some injuries too, which also played into it, but the age didn't allow him to play his way into being the starter. And that would be a problem next year. If the Sabres were to bring back James Reimer and it were to go like this season, where he's the best of your three, and you wouldn't be able to do that over the course of an entire year, I don't think, because I just would question whether his body at that age would hold up through the rigors of being a number one goalie night in and night out. I think what you are going to want is somebody that is younger so that if they do perform, that they could take the net over. And I don't see that possibility with Reimer because of his age. And also, Reimer's been like a lot of goalies have been throughout their careers. Reimer's an up and down guy. He has years like this every third year, every fourth year. He'll mix in a season where he's above average and, looking right now at some of the numbers, a .903 save percentage, pretty good. 714 quality start percentage, one of the best in hockey this year, actually. Goals saved above expected. He ranks 30th out of 80, which is good. But that's also partially limited because of his minutes. If you actually look at goalies that have played fewer than 20 games, like the true backups of the NHL, goalies that have played fewer than 20 games with a better goal saved above expected than Reimer. Freddie Anderson, who, by the way, will be a free agent this summer. Marcus Hogberg, Scott Wedgwood. Looking end of list. That's it. 3 guys that have played around the same workload he has that have been better. So Reimer statistically has been very good, but I wouldn't bet on that happening next year to the same degree. He's coming off a season last year with a sub 900 save percentage in Detroit, where he only played 20 games. How about the year prior in San Jose with an 890 save percentage? 911 before that, though, like against San Jose. So again, 1 year he's good, and then the next year he's down, and the next year he's good. It's been his whole career. And getting back-to-back seasons like this, I think, would be against the odds for what we've come to know of James Reimer. So that, combined with the age, I guess I wouldn't be upset if they brought him in at a 1-year deal and said, we're going to let you compete with Levi in training camp. And if Levi wins the job, then you can retire. Or if we'll put you on waivers and see if another NHL team wants you. That's what happened this year. Anaheim claimed him. The Sabres got him back. So there's a bunch of different things you could do with Reimer. But to me, that's not the plan I want. I don't think I'm going to get the plan I want because I would like to see Luukkonen be traded right now if you could find a suitor and you roll with Levi and a different veteran goalie. Maybe Freddie Anderson, by the way, one of these guys that is statistically better on the year than James Reimer. I'm just going to go from former Leafs goalie to former Leafs goalie here. Anderson, though, he's 35, so it's not much better. It's a little better, and he's had a better season than Reimer, but he also does play in Carolina. I don't need to force that in. I guess to me, Reimer and Anderson don't have to be too different, but I'd be looking around at better ideas. The problem, though, is, and this is where I might even get to, okay, fine, just bring back Reimer, and that's my plan. Go look at the free agent goalie list. Aiden Hill was one guy that you could have argued for, putting a lot of assets into to get because he was about to be a free agent, but he re-signed in Vegas. So you look at the list of free agent goalies and, you get your Philip Grubauers in there, you get your Ville Hussos in there, but you get veteran goalies that have been bad this year, or you get older guys like Anderson and Reimer who have been good, but you just don't know how much is left in the tank. So I'm not pushing it. It wouldn't be offensive to me if Reimer's back next year, but I would prefer Levi either to win the job and be the number 2, or them to go get their hands on a better veteran goalie. But that at this point would probably have to be via trade. So Reimer, good season, but I would expect that this is the only season. When we come back, what's coming up for the Sabres in the rest of the week? That's after this here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Sabres is presented by Monarch Money. Monarch Money, ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Whether it's dining out, that can add up, online shopping, that too, entertainment. It's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. Track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place so you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, even plan long-term goals, set goals like, whatever you want over 5 years or 3 years. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever, too. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, stay on the same page without all the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com. You're going to get 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. Final segment here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. Reminder, if you would like to get in on our Locked On Sabres text club, you can sign up by going to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnSabres. If you'd like to vote in our all-time favorite Buffalo Sabre poll, who's the most beloved Sabre in team history? If you would like to vote on that, head over to Twitter at Locked On Sabres. Some of the live polls right now as we close out round 1. Rob Ray, no surprise, taking it to Pierre Turgeon, 95%. Danny Briere, no surprise, 84% over 14 seed Tim Connolly. Haven't had a ton of upsets in this first round. We've had a couple. And then here's one that is going to come down to the wire. 7 seed Chris Drury against 10 seed Michael Peca. The two American Sabre captains going at it. Drury right now in the lead, 58%. But we'll see where that ends up. So you can vote on that. And for the Sabres, rest of the week, here comes the homestand. And their final, not their final homestand. They finished the season with 2 home games, Toronto and Philly. By the way, how lame is that? Give me those Toronto home games in the middle of the season, right? Like this game, even Toronto, I don't know, is Toronto going to fill it up? They probably will, right? But what does that game even mean to them? That's a great rivalry in that building when it happens. The Sabres always beat the Leafs. That's why I kind of even willing to call it a rivalry, because Toronto's obviously had way more success in recent years. But The Leafs are battling for the division, I guess. So they're up by 1 point on Tampa, 2 points on Florida. So, all right, they have a little to play for, or even a lot to play for, you could argue, because the difference for them, never mind. They have a lot to play for. The difference between playing Montreal in round 1 and Florida, that's massive for the Leafs. So they do want it. So that's the second to last game of the year, not even in this homestand that we're meaning to talk about. Tampa, Boston, Carolina are the next 3 in a row. So Tampa fighting for that division, 1 point behind the Leafs. Carolina, who is kind of set, they're going to play New Jersey. They're not playing for anything. They're 7 points up on the Devils for the 2 seed. They are 9 points back of Washington for the division. So they are settled in the 2 seed in the Metro. And then sandwiched between those 2 games, coming up on Sunday night, 6 o'clock. Boston is riding a 9-game losing streak. And they are now, go open up the standings. Actually, for our YouTube watchers, I'll put it up just because it's kind of beautiful to watch that they finally have fallen apart. Am I allowed to take a mini victory lap on this one? Hey, I admitted I was wrong earlier about the Sabres and their ability to finish this season. 1 year ago, I predicted the Bruins' downfall. And to quote Michael Burry in the Big Short, I wasn't wrong. I was just early. I was just early on the Bruins. I thought they would be terrible last year. They managed to squeak in the playoffs. They were fine. This year, they're in dead last after this 9-game losing streak. The Sabres, look at that. Sabres above the Bruins in the standings. Too bad we can't actually get real enjoyment out of it. But Boston is bad. I mean, think of the last time the Sabres just played them a couple weeks ago. Their top pair was Nikita Zadorov and Henry Jokiharju. They've got guys you've never heard of playing on their top 2 lines. But Boston is going to crater over the next year. And honestly, I've said this before, but I really think they're going to cost themselves Jack Eichel. I think that could happen. I think Eichel, given that he hadn't signed yet in Vegas, he still hasn't signed in Vegas, I would think that he'd want to go home. But if the team is horrible, then he might think twice about it. So we'll see what they look like a year from now, but they might cost themselves a run at Jack Eichel when he hits free agency next year, if he does hit free agency, because that team looks terrible. They are minus 52 goal differential. We kind of knew this all year, right? Like they were in the playoff race in January and February, but all the numbers look bad. Their goal differential numbers, any of the other 5-on-5 numbers you looked at, the goaltending didn't look good. Swayman's had a horrible year. So looking at what's ahead, Sabres putting Boston in their place in last is something to root for. I don't really give, whatever about the bottom of the standings, but if you do care about that and are looking for an update on where the Sabres look in terms of the draft order right now, they are above Boston, above Seattle. So that is the 6th to last pick. 27th in the league standings. That's the 6th to last pick. And by the way, they're 2 points from Philly. So they could go to 7th and then 8th pretty easily. 9th, 10th even. They could pass the Islanders, the Ducks. I mean, they could be picking 10th at this rate if they keep winning. So that's where you're looking at the bottom of the standings and what's coming up this week. The thing I'm going to be looking for the rest of the week, though, is Josh Norris going to play? Or is he going to get shut down for the year? We'll see if we get more details about that in the coming days. A little bit of a storyline to track. I think it's possible that the Sabres just shut down Norris and say, let's just get him healthy and worry about next year for him. That's a possibility for sure. All right, that'll do it for us here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. Sabres over the Senators sweep the season series. Next up, as we mentioned previously, is Tampa Bay on Saturday at 7 o'clock. So a couple of off days here for the Buffalo Sabres. And if you're looking for Ovechkin talk, 4 away. Scored again last night against the Bruins. 4 goals away from Gretzky's record. You want to check that out, head over to the Locked On NHL podcast. You can listen to them wherever you get your podcast, YouTube as well. Talk to you tomorrow here in the Locked On Sabres podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.